one thing that I was looking for in particular, did the Prophet ﷺ go beyond the Sidratul Muntaha alone, or was he accompanied by Jibreel? And I've looked in as many sources as I could, and I have access to, I could not find anything except for an indirect reference, and that is in Sahih Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ says, ثُمَّ عُرِجَ بِي حَتَّى ظَهَرْتُ لِمُسْتَوًا أَسْمَعُ فِيهِ صَرِيفَ الْأَقْلَامِ. Then I was caused to ascend forth in the singular. Not Jibreel brought me forward, because before that it was always Jibreel is bringing with me, and Jibreel tells me this is Sidratul Muntaha. Once he gets to Sidratul Muntaha, the Prophet ﷺ speaks in the third person that someone caused me to ascend, not Jibreel anymore. And I rose to a level where I could hear the pen writing. Now, what is the pen and who is the writer? We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the first thing that Allah created was the pen. أول شيء خلق الله تعالى القلم. And then Allah told the pen, uktub. So the pen asked Allah, what should I write? And Allah said, write everything that will happen until the end, until Yawm al-Qiyamah. Write everything. So the pen is being written directly by the command of Allah. There is no scribe doing the writing. The pen is a creation of Allah that is doing the writing. And the Prophet ﷺ is saying, I rose to a level where I could hear the pen being inscribed. Allahu A'lam, we can assume from this that the Prophet ﷺ rose beyond the Sidratul Muntaha alone. For two reasons. Number one, Jibreel is not mentioned at all. Jibreel is mentioned as having shown himself in his original form. Where? At the Sidra. At the Sidra. Right? That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. That once the Sidra has basically been shown, then I saw Jibreel. So it is as if now Jibreel has left off his shackles. He is now free to be who he is. But that's all he can be, at the Sidra. Then the Prophet ﷺ says in the singular, then I, biya, singular, I was caused to ascend up. There is no mention of Jibreel at all. Until I could hear the pen. Who is doing the writing? There is no angel above the Sidratul Muntaha. There is no living creature above the Sidratul Muntaha as far as we know. That's where everything stops. Now we hear that the Prophet ﷺ has gone beyond this. And therefore, it is, inshallah, legitimate to say that the Prophet ﷺ went to a level that no living creature has ever been to as far as we know. No living creature. He went beyond Jibreel, he went beyond even the Sidratul Muntaha, and he heard the divine pen as it was writing in the book that Allah Azza wa Jalla has with him. Because the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah wrote in a book that he has with him. كِتَابٌ عِنْدَهُ فَوْقَ عَرْشِهِ. There is a book that Allah has above the throne. And the Prophet ﷺ is saying, I rose to a level I could hear the pen inscribing in the book. Who else is there in this audience other than the owner of the throne and the one who tells the pen to write? So this was an elite audience, the likes of which we don't know ever occurred with any other being, any other creature. But we don't have any details about what was said except for the 50 salawat. Even though we can assume that other things were also said, but the only thing that has been reported to us is that the Prophet ﷺ said that 50 salawat were prescribed for me. And then from there we go on to what everybody knows, right? So this particular, and this is the pinnacle, and perhaps there is a wisdom that what happened is something that is private. What happened is something that is so precious, that is so noble, that is such a blessed gift that the Prophet ﷺ doesn't need or want to tell us. And that is something that only Allah and the Prophet ﷺ know the full conversation, what took place. And that is perhaps a wisdom as well. What do we know of this conversation? Just one thing. And that is Allah told him to pray 50 times. That Allah Azza wa Jal furidat alayya, the Prophet said, furidat alayya as-salawatu 50 salatan kulla yawm. 50 salawat every single day. Now you know the story from here. And he goes back down and he meets Musa. Now he must have passed by Ibrahim, because Ibrahim's in the 7th, right? Musa's in the 6th. He must have passed by. Ibrahim says nothing. Why not? Two reasons. Number one, Ibrahim alayhi salam is at a higher level. And it is not in the nature of Ibrahim to يعترض or to try to second guess. Whatever Allah says will go. Whereas Musa is not at that level of Ibrahim, and he wants to try to negotiate. Another point, Ibrahim has no experience with large ummahs, whereas Musa is the most experienced prophet up until this time. Up until this time, when he meets the Prophet ﷺ, he is the most experienced prophet. Now the Prophet ﷺ is going to have experiences in the Madini phase especially. But in the Meccan phase, he's only been active for 11, 12 years, right? And Musa has had, how much? 80 years or something of interaction with the Bani Israel, if not more than this. We don't, probably more than 80 to be honest. We don't know exactly when he became a prophet, but at least 80 to 90 years. So he has more experience. And therefore, Musa is the one who asks him. Oh, there's a third reason as well, by the way. There's a third reason. So, the first two we mentioned. The third one, Musa knows that something is going to happen in this meeting. How does he know this? Because he's been there, done that at a smaller scale. Way smaller. Because Musa is the only prophet whom Allah Azza wa Jalla spoke to directly before the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There is of course a reference to Adam being spoken to as well, by the way, but that was in Jannah. That was in Jannah. But Musa only went up to a mountain, and Allah spoke to him on this earth. Our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was granted a divine audience in the presence of the King of Kings. And he was called up as the messenger. So Musa has been there, done that at a way smaller scale, and that is on earth. And Musa knows. Now, by the way, this also shows Musa was there for how long? How long was he in Tur Sinai? 40 days. The appointment was for 30, and then Allah increased it 10. This clearly shows that a lot happened. What do we know of what happened? Nothing other than the 10 commandments. Correct? Right? Nothing other than the 10 commandments. That's what Musa tells his people and what we know. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ must have been there for a time frame. Time doesn't have meaning up there, right? There's no watch over there. This is in the world of Allah Azza wa Jal. When he comes back to this earth, only a few minutes have gone by. But what happened and how long, this is another dimension for us, if you like, right? So how long was he in the presence of Allah? What happened? Zero details. So Musa has been there, done that. He knows there's going to be a message, a commandment. Like he was given the 10 commandments, the Prophet is going to be given something. So he asked the Prophet, what did your Lord tell you for your ummah? Because he knows. He knows that such a meeting would not be except for multiple purposes. One of them being, what did your Lord tell you for your ummah? So here the Prophet says that my Lord told me that I should tell my ummah to pray 50 times a day. To pray 50 times a day. Here Musa says, irji' ila rabbik. Go back to your Lord. وَسَلْهُ التَّخْفِيفِ. And tell him to lower this, because I have more experience than you with the Bani Israel, and your ummah will not be able to do 50 times a day. So this is a detail that many people don't know. It's in Musnad Imam Ahmad. The Prophet ﷺ looked at Jibreel wanting to get his opinion. كَأَنَّهُ يَسْتَشِيرُهُ, the riwayah says, as if he's getting his opinion. And Jibreel nodded to him, yes, do that. And this shows us that despite Musa being who he is, the Prophet ﷺ did not feel content until he got a second opinion. A second opinion. And you know, in the world that we live in, anything that's major, we should always get a second opinion. Here, even in the next world, the Prophet ﷺ is getting a second opinion. Right? Musa's opinion is good, but it's not good enough. So he looks to Jibreel, كَأَنَّهُ يَسْتَشِيرُهُ, getting his istishara. What do you think? And so Jibreel nods to him, أي نعم, yes, you should do it. So basically backed with the second best prophet and the first best angel, right? The Prophet feels empowered. So, and this is, by the way, another evidence that Jibreel did not go up with him. That Jibreel is still down. That he's going up by himself. Right? So he goes back up, because if Jibreel had gone up, then he wouldn't have needed to do the asking there. Jibreel is in the 7th heaven, in the 6th heaven. So the Prophet went back up. Now here is where the riwayat differ. Some of them say it went down 5, 5, 5. Others say it went down 10, 10, 10. There is no way to resolve this. They're all authentic. But really the point is the same. And that is multiple times back and forth, back and forth. If 5 times, or was it 9 times, but it went back and forth. We don't know exactly how many, because the riwayah differ, but it was clearly at least 5 times. At least 5 times he's going back and forth, and every time Musa is telling him the same thing, that go back to your Lord and ask him to lower it, because I have tested the children of Israel and they will not be able to do this. Your ummah will not be able to do this. Until finally when he came back down with 5, this was when Musa said it one more time, and the Prophet ﷺ said, I have gone back and forth hatta stahyaytu, until I am embarrassed now. How much am I going to do? How much am I going to go back? وَلَكِنْ أَرْضَى وَأُسَلِّمْ, but I am content and happy. So when he said this, نَادَى مُنَادٍ, a voice called out, and this is the voice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَمْضَيْتُ فَرِيضَتِي وَخَفَّفْتُ عَنْ عِبَادِي, my faridah has been established and I have made things easier for my servants. It is 5, but it shall be rewarded with 50. It is 5, but it shall be rewarded with 50. What this means is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody astaghfirullah with weak iman will say, why didn't the Prophet go back, get it down more? Right? The response is, firstly, be careful of your adab with the Prophet if anybody's thinking this. Secondly, Allah had already decreed it would be 5. And the Prophet Allah basically gave him that ilham to know when to stop. That Allah had already decreed it would be 5. And that's why when the Prophet said, I'm embarrassed to go anymore, the voice came out. And the 2 people hearing it are the 2 people who've already had an audience with Allah, Musa and the Prophet, right? The 2 people hearing this have already had experience with Allah. So Allah is speaking to them because He's already spoken to them. And what does Allah say? This is my faridah, and it will pass. And I have already basically made it easy for my servants. And it is 5, but it shall be rewarded with 50. It is 5, but it should be rewarded with 50. Now, over here, again, so much can be derived over here. So much can be derived. But of the things that we benefit from this, first and foremost, the status of the salah. The status of the salah. That, just like we talked about Surah Al-Baqarah, the last 2 verses being given at this time, in fact, the salah is in fact an even higher level, if you like, than this, because the purpose of the divine audience was to establish the salah. That every single commandment, from the zakah to the hajj to tahajjud to Quran to the jihad, everything, Allah Azza wa Jal sent Jibreel down to the Prophet to command us to do things. But for one commandment, it was so important that the messenger was called to the King of Kings to receive the message directly from the divine. There was only one thing that was so important that our Rasul is told, you need to come up, because there's a message that needs to be delivered directly to you. So the messenger is summoned to the presence of the divine. And what is then decreed? The one commandment, only one commandment that we know of, and all the rest come down indirectly through Jibreel, and that is the salah. And if this was the only blessing that we have of salah, it is enough of a blessing. But you can add to this that the Quran is full of the importance of salah. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ أَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ طَرْفَ النَّهَارِ وَزُلَفًا مِنَ النَّيْلِ. Every single prophet is mentioned in the Quran as praying. The Prophet says, I passed by the grave of Musa, he was praying. The Prophet says, I entered Bayt al-Maqdis, Ibrahim is praying, Musa is praying, Isa is praying. Salah is a standard, every single prophet. And so many verses in the Quran, and there are plenty of khutbahs you can listen to about the blessings of salah. The very first verse in the Quran, that this is هُدَى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ. From the very beginning, right? Isa in the cradle, as a baby, he says that my Lord has commanded me with salati was zakati ma dumtu hayya. As a baby, he is saying, my Lord has commanded me to do salah and to pay zakah as long as I live. All of this shows salah was important, and it was so important for our ummah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself invited the Prophet to receive this direct commandment.